Well,
Take it
hello,
away.
and thank you for the introduction, Hillary. Thank you, everybody else, for having me here. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to present on some of the what I think is cutting edge work my team and I are doing, and also to connect with so many of you and the great work you're doing here on invasive species in New York. And I appreciate the updates here this morning. I learned some things just from listening there. For our presentation today, I'm going to spend a brief minute sort of introducing my team, a little bit about how we came to be and what we do. It's a little bit different, sort of in the dynamic of New York State invasive species monitoring. Then we'll spend some time discussing some of our previous studies and previous work on invasive species mapping and monitoring. And then I'll talk through one of our ongoing studies here in New York State, and then wrap up with sort of what is in the immediate future and what does that look like here for us and how that might impact you all as well here. So the team I lead is called Galago, and our mission is helping environmental managers understand and monitor what's happening on the land so they can make informed decisions. We do this using a combination of advanced technologies, including drones and artificial intelligence. And we are actually a technology startup launched by the global engineering design company Ramble. So, kind of the neat thing about Ramble here is, let's see, about 2 years ago now, Ramble merged with the engineering company O'Brien and Gear, which is pretty heavy in New York State. I think some of you might know the name. And now we have some great colleagues here that actually wrote the New York State Invasive Species Comprehensive Management Plan back in 2018. So we have sort of the technology startup side of things, and then we also have some experience working in New York State, and it's allowed us to really carve out where we think some of the challenges are that we can help to address in this space. So invasive species monitoring, as you all know, can be relatively expensive and require a lot of manual boots on the ground. You have to have people out here doing the work, and the work has to be done in a timely manner. I heard a lot in the updates about rapid responses and being able to go out quickly and find these new populations and mitigate them. It's also very difficult to track over time, and in the case of some species, such as giant hogweed, which again I heard mentioned multiple times, can actually be hazardous to send people out in the field to do this type of work, and requires special precautions due to that. And so that's really where my team came in here. We wanted to build a technology to support our work and the work of our colleagues, and we did that using the expertise we have in image mapping, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And some people here might laugh, but really our goal, we're trying to give ecologists superhuman abilities. Hopefully you'll see some of that during the call today, that we can help reduce the amount of time and cost that it takes to do these surveys on a per area basis. You can also help to improve some of the decision making that oftentimes you just have an incomplete picture of what's going on. And we're doing that just like a high growth technology startup would, but also with that expertise from our colleagues in Ramble in the background here. So, all this is great. I just wanted to be real brief to let people know where we are. But what's really important is the groundbreaking new technologies we're applying here. And if applied properly, they can provide a lot of value for invasive species mapping and monitoring. And there's sort of 4 areas we group these values into. The first is by using drone mapping technology, like we'll discuss here today, you can get a complete picture of your entire site. So actually a map of the entire site as it exists today and in high resolution. Because that data is digital, it actually allows you to analyze that imagery, as we'll see here today, and you can then say you've actually looked at the entire site in detail, and that provides some robustness in the extensive results that you get. By having that digital copy, you can then go back. So if you captured drone imagery 2 years ago, you can look back in time 2 years and understand what you may expect to find today. You can compare that with what you find today and identify trends or patterns that you otherwise might not be able to see. And that allows you to safeguard manage the assets that you're protecting or the land that you're protecting. And perhaps the most compelling case for using this type of technology is the fact that this can allow all of us to do more and to do more with less funding, perhaps, than is currently possible. And so saving time and making our dollars stretch further is a key component to all of this. So to sort of demonstrate some of that, I'll show some of the previous work we've done here, and then the last section here we'll talk about ongoing work we're doing and where this can go in the immediate future. So last year we initiated a project with an entity called Highways England. This is actually the interstate authority for England. They manage the major road networks in England. And as you have here in New York, they also have giant hogweed as an invasive species. This plant, which most of you I think are familiar with, first introduced as ornamental, is now known as the UK's most dangerous plant. And it's quite challenging to deal with here. If there's any development done on lands where giant hogweed is identified, you either have to prove that you've eradicated that, which could take several years, of course, with the seed bank to actually eradicate giant hogweed population. And if you don't have the plant eradicated and you've identified it on your site, you actually have to remove any soil from that site and treat it as hazardous waste, special type of hazardous waste. So it's quite cumbersome to go through this process in England. And giant hogweed, it's a big pain in addition to being a human health hazard and a risk to biodiversity there. So working with Highways England, the solution we developed was to capture very high resolution imagery data of a study site where giant hogweed was known to exist. So for this, we picked a 350-acre study site. We went out to the field and spent several hours mapping the site with a drone, and then we were able to take that data back into the office and analyze the data on our computing systems. So the data that we see in this image, the brown areas, or at least some of these brown areas, are giant hogweed. We unfortunately had trouble getting out there early enough to see it flowering, so in which case the imagery we see here is actually after that giant hogweed has already gone to seed in England. And to give you an idea of the scale and the spatial resolution of this imagery, across this 350 acres, the pixel size is just about 2 inches. And so we're able to see with a very fine level of detail what's happening across this entire site. So this information, just mapping, is quite useful in general, but we're trying to take this sort of to the next level by combining drone imagery technology with another type of technology, artificial intelligence. And not just artificial intelligence, but a subset of artificial intelligence and a subset of machine learning, if you're familiar with those terms, called deep learning. And the way deep learning essentially works is, if we look at the top left of this diagram, we have images, and in those images, we have a feature that we're identifying. So we can actually extract those features and the values of those features. So we know what the pixels of a giant hogweed look like, and we're able to extract that as an image chip or as a giant hogweed image chip. Then we're able to use that information to train a model or an algorithm, which can be used to predict against other imagery in the future. So we capture one set of imagery, then we put that, tell the model what giant hogweed looks like, and then when we collect another set of imagery, the model can then run on that, as we show on the bottom here, and predict where the giant hogweed is. So the model can actually guess where the giant hogweed is. So this is not necessarily a new technology, but it's relatively new in the space of invasive species mapping and monitoring. Facebook uses this type of technology, so does Google Photos for identifying faces and tagging people in pictures. Similar types of algorithms are applied for email spam filters. So we use these types of algorithms all the time. We're just applying it to drone imagery in a very unique use case here and trying to extract that value out of it. So what that allows us to do, and what we've done here in England, is we've mapped this 350-acre site in high resolution. Then we've trained the model what giant hogweed looks like, and then we're able to run the model, and it's able to automatically map for us the locations, as you see in orange here, of where all the giant hogweed actually is on the site across this whole 350 acres. And so, as you can see here, there's some areas that you have this inherent advantage with the agility of a drone, that it flies over the entire site rather than somebody trucking through the woods looking for this poisonous plant. And so you're able to identify areas that are not necessarily visible from the ground. It's also very fast to do this. 350 acres was accomplished in just a few hours on site. And because of the way that we actually interpret this imagery using algorithms, and it's very mathematical and quantitative, this is a replicatable method that you can then go back several years in a row and document that change over time, document the eradication effort, and actually prove that you're removing these plants and be confident in that. So this initial study here, this is another example here where you have some of these plants that are actually back in the woods that we've identified in orange here that you may not be able to see from the woods. You may never identify them otherwise here. And one of the big advantages to highlight from this was we did this over not just a small area, but again, this is a 350 acre tract of land. You have a 6-lane highway on the right there to sort of give you an idea of what the scale of this site is. And obviously, this is a pretty significant giant hogweed infestation. We knew that was the case, which is why we actually selected this site, because we wanted something that had lots of training data for our algorithm. So that was important to have this sort of proof of concept method here. So other sort of research and studies we've done on this so far is that this is not just giant hogweed, but there's other types of species we can perform this work on. It's really highly dependent on physical characteristics of the plant and the species itself, including the seasonality and, from the extent, Himalayan balsams and other species of concern. They treat it the same way, very similarly to giant hogweed in England. So we've looked at that. And in the Western US, we've looked at what you see on the screen here, which is actually this red grass here. It's cheatgrass. It's an invasive species that's quite prevalent for some of the clients we work with in the Western US. So later this year, we're hoping to be able to monitor several restoration projects in a grassland setting for Highways England. So testing another sort of use case here and looking at even more different kinds of plant species and what can we extract from this imagery in different settings here. So that's some of the foundational work we've accomplished thus far. The work that we have ongoing right now is primarily in New York, as we're waiting for the next phase of work in England. And we started this work by reaching out to several key stakeholders here in New York, including the Invasive Species Research Institute. And eventually we got connected to Naya Kraus, who I saw is on the call today. Thanks for joining, Naya. And Andrew Moscoli over at the New York State DEC Giant Hogweed Program. And we just started by discussing this technology with the goal of identifying the potential pilot area to study here. And together we identified an 1,100 acre property just north of Springwater, New York. It's owned by New York State. It's pictured in the screen here. And it's managed by the DEC. In 2020, there was no giant hogweed survey on site, but in 2019, there was approximately 3,600 square meters of hogweed infestation recorded. Some other key characteristics of the site, which you may be able to tell just from looking at this, is that it's actually quite difficult to survey in a foot because it's very swampy in this region, and it has very dense vegetation. It's actually possible that there's some areas that the ground survey crews had not been able to identify in the past. So a great candidate here as a pilot study. So again, just to give you an idea here, we're at the south end of Hemlock Lake, and in this Hemlock Canada State Forest, as you see with the golden star there. And an idea of scale here, the image on the left is the area identified in the New York State DEC giant hogweed database. You can see some of the polygons overlapping where they found giant hogweed. We mapped for this study not the entire 1,100 acre area, but we focused in on approximately 300 acres and did focus flights on several different smaller areas of the site as well. So some of the key methodological questions that we're trying to answer were about the resolution required, the spatial resolution, and that's largely dependent on the flight altitude. And so we tested the site flying at multiple different altitudes to capture different types of data. We also had a question about when are giant hogweed plants actually visible in imagery. We proved in England that we can identify the brown seed head very easily. We think it's very likely we can identify the large white flowering head. But the question we're really driving at is, can we identify the big green sort of distinct leaves of giant hogweed before that flower even blooms? So can we provide that early detection, which would be much more useful to directing field crews in this case and guiding eradication efforts before those seeds became a method to continue the population in this area. And so we thus far have completed flights on several dates this spring, May 21st, June 16th, and June 23rd. And we're capturing the beginning, you can actually see it in this image here, of the bloom season here, and have actually been able to identify several leaves who we suspect to be giant hogweed through this area as well. So just a preliminary eyeball sort of investigation or manual review of this data, we can identify some large white flowering heads. Apologize, I don't have scale on here, but these are still several feet wide as they begin to bloom. And you can see these in a number of locations throughout the imagery as shown, circled in red here. And so we believe these are suspects. We haven't confirmed these with ground-based investigations yet, but suspect giant hogweed locations. And these are the types of information that if we have enough of them, we can use to actually train an algorithm to look for giant hogweed blooms and to look for giant hogweed leaves as well. And so the process we're going through right now, using the last round of data, is actually to create some of these training data polygons. So we go into a mapping system and we actually draw circles and polygons you see on the screen here around the giant hogweed that we suspect in the imagery. Then we use that to train a model, which we can then apply to the rest of the data set. So ideally, we'll be able to train an algorithm to look through this 300-acre area and look through every single square inch of this 300-acre parcel and identify everywhere that there is a potential for giant hogweed. Then we can actually provide this information to DEC for the field crews to walk directly up to these locations and eradicate the plants. You know, the dream here would be we go back next year and then prove that they're all gone as well. So some of the future work here, and this is sort of a bleeding line between future work and ongoing work, we'll be providing an additional mapping time step, maybe even 2 more flights throughout the summer here. And that would be to capture the flowers when they're in full bloom. If we can identify when these flowers are in full bloom, we can actually look back at the imagery we captured from May and see if the leaves are distinguishable in those same locations. That'll set us up for the future work here. We'll also be able to compare some of the work we've been doing with on-the-ground survey data from the New York State DEC Giant Hogweed Program. We're hoping to be able to provide our data to them, and then they could actually go out, confirm these locations, and potentially eradicate these locations. Looking forward, I think we want to get through the summer and sort of see what level we can bring this technology to. But we're looking to try and find some sort of a technology grant. The U.S. Forest Service has a program that we're interested in, where we can actually test this on more sites across New York and prove out the feasibility and the use cases for giant hogweed, but also to begin to look at what are the other key species that we want to start using this technology on, and where's the value? Because I don't think this is applicable, obviously, on every single invasive species site, but it is applicable on many of the larger sites, the more challenging sites, at least for now here. So some of the punchlines that I wanted to bring home about this technology is that this allows us to significantly reduce the amount of time in the field. We estimate that this could be upwards of 40 to 50% reductions of time in the field by being able to walk directly up to locations and having sort of a probabilistic approach to identify where we think is the most likely location for giant hogweed. And that same thing carries to other species as well here. We also have the ability to capture relatively small phenological time windows here. So if you only have a couple of weeks before the flowers bloom and they drop their seeds, This allows you to cover all that ground very quickly. And where you used to be able to do just maybe 10 sites, maybe in the future we can do 40 sites with that same amount of time. Somebody going around mapping all these and then, uploading that, getting the results back, and then sending field crews out to perform confirmation and eradication. Ultimately, that means a cost reduction in the area that you can survey with this technology, compared to just having to walk around on the grounds. And there's obvious benefits here as well, just to being able to have all this digital record and being able to look back in time and analyze that data, understand what's going on at these sites in just a level of detail that really wasn't possible for any of us until just within the last couple of years here. Being able to document that on a repeatable fashion and show this is also important. And one of the other things we've experienced with some of our clients in Australia and actually in the Western US as well is the ability to rapidly get sort of a snapshot report back about these sites. So traditional ecological surveys, if you hire a consultant, can sometimes take months to get a report back because they're obviously busy in the field collecting the data. And if they need to go back and write up the reports, that also takes a while to compile the data and then make useful interpretations. If you're looking for just a really quick snapshot, what is the presence or the absence? Is it trending up or down? This type of system in the near future, within a 2-year time horizon, I hope that we'll be able to provide a system where you can fly it in the morning, upload the data in the afternoon, and when you wake up the next morning, you could have a report detailing where these plant species actually are occurring or not occurring at your site, and have an idea of whether you need to send field crews there or if they need to go to another site that's a higher priority. So you all, I'm sure, can tell I'm very excited about all of this, and I hope some of that excitement and some of the knowledge from this presentation has been interesting here today. I want to end with a quote from one of our clients, which I use this on most of my presentations, and I still get goosebumps every time I actually share this, but it's the idea that we're now making maps we've never been able to make before. And it's really just an exciting time to be working in this field and to be applying these to natural resource management challenge statements. And so I hope with that in mind here, I'm happy to open it up for discussions. I hope everybody's learned something here today, and I'm more than interested to hear everybody on what types of thoughts or comments they may have.